Welcome, Unit 8, kind of place we've been looking to get to, and we are finally there. That's always a good thing. We are at our happy conclusion, and you'd think that we'd end on a happy note. But I do have to take us to a place of some conflict. It seems to me that, at least in my parish experience, there's nothing quite as prone to contention as the educational program of a church. You would think it might be the worship aspects of church, and they certainly get their share of controversy and questions, but that's restricted to a few people. I mean, the pastor, the organist, maybe the church choir director, those are the few who are really directly in charge and leading the worship life of a congregation. But you talk education. You talk education. You have far more people in a leadership role, it seems to me, and with the far more people, the greater the number of controversies and challenges, decisions at least, that have to be made. And so if we're going to do a unit on education in this entire long journey that you're on, I think we'd be amiss if we didn't also then speak by nature and by force on the challenges of conflict in the congregation. Now, of course, we're going to be speaking about, in essence, educational conflicts, but you certainly can take these principles and use them in conflict situations throughout congregation ministry, of course, beyond congregation ministry too. I want to give a hats off to the sources for this in particular, a number of sources. Peter Steinke, at a presentation to the South Wisconsin District, is a source of some, and his work is very good. My colleagues here, and I'm in my office, so I'm just pointing down the hallway to my friends and colleagues here in the theology division, and my own personal experience and the great leadership shown by the leaders of St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Butternut, Wisconsin, where I served. And they embody how to live happily and well with each other. Not that we had no controversies, no difficulties. Oh, we had them. But we survived, we went through, and we went past them, and they were resolved. So thank you to all those who have, in part, shaped this, and many times will hear themselves in all these words. So, with all that said, let's begin with ourselves. Probably a natural place, it's at least our own nature to turn to ourselves and say, what about me? First of all, it's the old dictum, and you certainly have heard it before, that we can't control the actions of others, but we certainly can control the actions of ourselves. And that's so true, isn't it? I can't always predict, and I certainly can't throttle what you're going to do, or say, or feel. But I can have a handle on all the above for myself. What I say, what I do, and even what I feel, I think, is somewhat an elective choice. I dare not feel driven in any one of those aspects by somebody else. I dare not give the control of my words, my actions, or even my feeling to somebody else, because they don't have control. Somebody else might be in exactly my position, have an entirely different response in all three levels, saying, action, and feeling. And so there's no inevitability that this action by this person must drive me to this result. Beware of handing over that level of control to someone else. So in this case, oddly enough, I think a selfish perspective, a beginning with a focus on oneself, is very, very important. And having a calm, a control, is really good. Along with that, it seems to me that as a long-term process, a healthy personal life is also crucial. The Model T in 1988. 1988 was a difficult year in Butternut. We had a tragedy that happened in our town, and it was a tragedy that affected our church very, very much. It affected me personally, and I felt caught in a kind of a classic triangulation situation. It's amazing what happened also in that time, because it was going on. 88 was, in other ways, a very good year, and it's God's blessing that it was. Left to myself, I think I would have just stewed and worried and not done well in that difficult year, but that was the same time a couple of great things were going on in our life. Our two children, we had two at the time, Nicole was still to come in 2 years. We had two children at a wonderful age. Christy was 5, Steve was 2. They demanded time. They gave more than they took. It was a great time at home. Everything was going well. It was a moment to discover and to savor. It also was the time I discovered the Model T. That's when I began to restore that car. My dad was at a good time in his life yet where he could be a great partner with me in restoring it. And it became the release. When things weren't going well necessarily in the office, they were doing just fine in the garage and in the shop. And we were discovering new things, my dad and I, about each other, while at the same time work was kind of challenging. So have a healthy balance for yourself. And be active, be physically well, of course, be involved with a circle of friends that are supportive, also cautionary, people who are going to tell you when you need a new direction. But maintain that healthy life, not just in a moment of crisis, but long before that crisis comes. It'll come then at its own time. Remain calm, at least on the surface. I kind of like this image. When the disciples were about to drown, Jesus certainly responded to them, but he walked. He didn't run. It's a nice image, isn't it? Jesus walks on the raging waters, even though the disciples are, I'm sure, thinking their death is imminent. But they didn't run. He didn't run to them. He walked. You probably have time to walk to the resolution of a conflict. You probably don't need to run to resolve it. Good idea. Now a thought on conflict itself. The conflict might have a purpose. It shows progress. I like the conflict of Jesus with the Pharisees in Mark chapters 2 and 3. Now, things aren't going well with them. As you read those 2 chapters, things are in fact escalating in conflict. If you and I were going to script the ministry of Jesus, I doubt that we would script it that way. We would encourage that level of conflict. But he does, and he knows exactly why. It reveals who he is. They are driven to question, who is this man? And everybody who's ever read Mark knows the answer. But it's their conflict and their questions that drive that answer. He is the Christ, the Son of God. He is God. And it drives their action. Now their action is, it seems, the opposite of what we want. Mark chapter 3, verse 6, and says they with the Herodians took counsel how they might destroy him. But that's what we need, don't we? We need him to go to the cross. We need them to resolve that there is no fixing this situation with this man. He has to die. If that's their resolution, then we've got progress. It's a strange progress, but it's a progress that's necessarily built out of conflict. Now, I don't think that you're probably getting that same level of conflict in your congregation ministry. It'd be horrible if somebody's planning to kill somebody as their resolution. But is it possible that conflict leads to something good? Well, yeah. Look at, for instance, Romans 8:28, the idea that God has a security and a plan and a purpose for all things. Also, especially Genesis. I love Genesis 50:20, where Joseph looks at his brothers and he says to them, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, for the saving of many lives. Now, God meant it for good. He's going to save lives of people. He meant it for good. But what that good might be is broader than ourselves. If you're asking at this moment of conflict, what good is this to me? You might not have an answer. There might not be any immediate, discernible good to you. But that's all right. Maybe it's not about us. Maybe we're leaders not for ourselves, but for somebody else. And it's for the sake of others, a little bit of Esther here, that we were brought into the kingdom at this time. That's the broader good that conflict might bring about. It might benefit us too in some discernible way and some indiscernible way. It will probably at least increase our patience and increase the amount of prayer that we are involved in. But think of a good in a broader way than just ourselves. All right, that's a thought on conflict. Let's go now to these people. That's probably where we're naturally going anyway. After dealing with ourselves in conflict, what about these people that we're in conflict with? Well, and this is from my dear friend Tom Feiertag, who has often reminded us whenever conflict strikes that some people will be unhappy. That's just a given of life. Somebody's going to be unhappy. Just make sure it's the right person or people who are unhappy. You know, there's a lot of wisdom to that. If we can accept the fact that sometimes all the compromise, all the accommodation in the world is not going to resolve this, somebody is going to be unhappy, then make sure it's the right person. That takes wisdom, doesn't it? And again, the cautious, slow approach. It probably also takes more than one person to decide who that will be, but I'll let it stand. I think there's good thought there. Also, recognize where this person has been. If you're in a conflict, especially if you're relatively new to this group and this situation, if you're in a conflict with a certain individual, it might be very good to know what's their past been. Have they been angry at the world for 50 years? And now you're just the next in a very long line of people whom they have chewed on? Well, join the club. In fact, the danger might be if they get along with you. If in fact this is the first time they've ever found somebody to agree with, I suspect that that agreement will be held in high suspicion by everyone who knows them, and your words are going to be lost because they've never gotten along with anybody. So take with a grain of salt the fact that this person, who's always been angry, is angry at you too. Well, join the club. On the other hand, have you just gotten the nicest woman on earth so angry that she will no longer come to church? Then you have a problem. It's not her problem, it's yours. Now that's a very different issue, and that also happens. And when it's happened, I have seen the one who causes that problem is merely dismissing it as her problem. No, no, no. It is not her problem. She truly is, I'm thinking of a very specific person, truly is the nicest person on earth. And when she is this angry because of what's going on, it's not her doing. It's yours. You have generated this conflict. So take that with a deep grain of salt. So carefully distinguish the nature, the past, and experience of the people who are in conflict either with each other or with you at this time and balance them out. Consider the value of another person's perspective. Let their own words speak to you. The tell me what I said method is really good. Here's what I would do. Often when I would make a visit with people, we would talk a long time on some issue that is, emotional and difficult. We'd get done after, an hour and a half, and I love to say to people, we've been talking a long time. And it's late, and I got to go, and you've got to go. But when this is all done, somebody's going to come home and ask you, Pastor was here, wasn't he? And you're going to say, yeah, he was. And they may well say, what did he say? What would you say to him? We've been talking a long time, and they only want to hear, 2, 3, 4 sentences, 30 seconds at most. But if they ask, what did Pastor say? What would you say? You know what? That is a fascinating question to ask. You will probably not hear what you want to hear. You will hear the second cousin, at best, of what you said. You will probably not hear the thing that you repeated 4 times and were sure, you were absolutely sure, there's no way they couldn't get this. You won't hear that. They'll say something turned into their own way of expressing, and then what do? Well, you pick up on the part that is closest to what you said, emphasize it, and if you want to say the main thing again, now it'll be the, 6th or 7th time you've said it, go ahead and say it again. By the way, you should always go the other way and say, I've got to do the same thing. See if you can repeat what they said in this last hour and a half, and ask them, did I get that right? Or did I miss something big? And you, on the basis of that, have another chance to build a bridge with somebody. So the tell me what I said method, I like it. It's worked well for me. All this takes perspective and time. When talking about the congregation, speak of a majority that's healthy. Speak in present tense about we do, we are. Let me give you the context. In Butternut, we embarked, after I was there a very short time, on what for Butternut was a very ambitious building project, more money than they had ever spent. And I was very new and very young at all of this. And the Sunday before we were voting on Tuesday, at our services, at the end of each service, I mentioned, of course, that the announcements that we're going to be voting. And I expressed it this way. I said, I hope you can all come on Tuesday. But I know that not everybody's going to be able to come. And I am especially interested on what happens on Wednesday morning. If you're able to be here with us on Tuesday night and vote with us on whether we should build or not, somebody is going to ask you, oh, hey, what was the vote? What was decided on last night? The first word you use is, it seems to me, most important. If you say, they decided, then we lost. I don't really care if they decided to build or not to build. It's they. And that's someone other than us. If your first word is we decided, then again, I don't really care whether we decided to build or not to build, because we decided. And that's the real key. It isn't a vote that can be split down the middle with a bare majority winning and counting it a success. If that happens, we are not a success. We're going to come together on Tuesday and we'll talk at great length, as we already have, of what we should do. But the real key is which pronoun we're going to use when we're all done. It dare not be they. It ought to be we. Well, that's what I said, and I still like it. We did have a lively meeting, a good debate, and we decided to build. And it was a good thing that we built. And it's still there. The addition that we built on, I trust it'll be there. Well, it could be there another 100 years. Butternut's that kind of place. So it's a success if we speak of we and us, and a failure if we speak of them. Finally, allow for time. It does take a great deal of time to make change, significant change. And change can happen in a number of ways. You could have change in 4 ways. You'll change, they'll change, you'll leave, or they'll leave. That's a classic. And you know, when you think of those possibilities, given enough time, 5 years is often mentioned, probably one of those will happen. And if it doesn't happen in 5 years, give it a little more time, but it will work. And so don't find yourself necessarily locked into a situation that's static and with no hope one way or the other. Finally, consider the value of both sides. I'm thinking here of conflict which is so severe that people leave the group. Now, they can leave the meeting of the group. For instance, youth leadership takes a dive, and your youth attendance that used to be 15, 20, 25 is down now single digits. Oh my gosh, it's down to 2. 2 is not a success. You need a balance in perspective. It could also be in a larger congregational experience where people are literally leaving the church, or they're simply not going to come to worship as long as this is going on. And your attendance has gone from 280 to 75. What's happening? You need to value both those who leave and those who stay. There's a role for both of them. Enough people have to leave to show that the problem is serious. Enough people have to stay that when the problem is resolved, there's someone to pick up the pieces. How many need to leave and how many do we need to stay? That probably changes for each situation. But I don't think we can put an absolute value on either one to the exclusion of the other. That often happens. People who leave are disparaged by those who stay. Those who stay are thought to be fools by those who leave. That doesn't work. Both are needed. You might be one who leaves. You might be one who stays. But see the purpose and the importance of both sides. And if you're one, by the way, who stays, you might very easily use the absence of so many, their deliberate, obvious leaving, and why it is, as a lever to finally effect change, at least to recognize that a serious conflict is here and it cannot be ignored. All right, so see the value of both. Finally, help others to focus on why are we here. Lyle Scheller has a great old quote. It's a wonderful one. If we're not out fishing, we're in fighting. And I think that works pretty well. Lastly, in all of these things, set boundaries that you share together. I've been speaking in many ways about what you do individually, and that's certainly true, and you do need to take care of yourself. You need to control your own thoughts and actions and emotions. But on top of all of that, you also need, as much as possible, to involve others. This is a balance. It's first of all a balance of healthy living, that you've got others with whom you can check your own actions. You need a body of people who are not identical to you, who have different perspectives, who are willing to tell you the truth, and who you are willing to listen to. If you have that body of people who will tell you when you're wrong, and who you have agreed to listen to them if they do that, if they say you're wrong, you've got to change, you shouldn't have done that, then recognize their wisdom greater than your own, you're in a good place. Also, you need a larger body of people with whom to decide, what do we do? Involve, for instance, the Board of Ed. Involve the church council. Involve another group, the trustees, the elders, whoever it is that's also involved in this issue. But don't make a unilateral decision. Don't simply deliver it to this group. Say, we, again, not I, not you, not they, but we need to find an answer. And make that answer not just for this moment. Make it an answer that will work over the long span of time. Develop not answers, but more policies. Not solutions to this moment, but something that will stand at least as much as you can foresee to the problem when it comes again. All of those are your hope. Finally, pray. Pray for your opponent, your enemy, their health, their spirit, their mind. Pray for strength and wisdom and a good spirit within yourself. Pray for the church and all its diverse members. Pray for showing a little bit of the glory that God has. Best wishes to you. Thank you for taking a part of this class or taking this class. Thank you for your part in it, for the discussions we've had and will still have now in this unit. And God bless you as you teach and as you lead in your church's education.